He was 52 years old. He had just lost the only job he had ever known. His savings would last 4 months, his confidence maybe less. Most people in that moment would have given up. Most people would have updated their resume, sat by the phone, and waited for someone to tell them they were still worth something. Gary Merritt didn't wait. He drove to the edge of town. He handed over $87, and he walked into a 10-by-10 storage unit, with nothing but a set of tools, a folding table, and the quiet, stubborn belief that the best chapter of his life hadn't been written yet. 18 months later, he had a business that made more in a single month than his old factory job paid in 3. He lost everything at 52, then rebuilt his life from a storage unit. This is his story, and it starts, the way all the best ones do, at the very bottom. The fall. Gary Merritt grew up in Lansing, Michigan, the kind of city that was built around one idea. Make something with your hands, and you'll always have a place in the world. His father worked the assembly line, his uncle worked the assembly line, and at 19 years old, Gary Merritt took his place on the assembly line too. For 23 years, that was his life. Not glamorous, not exciting, but honest, steady, the kind of work that lets a man sleep at night. He got married at 26, had a daughter, Kayla, at 29, bought a modest house, 2 bedrooms, a garage he was proud of, in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone's name. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was his life, and he had earned every square inch of it. Then came a Tuesday in October, 2019. Gary was called into his supervisor's office at 2:15 in the afternoon. He figured it was a scheduling thing, maybe an overtime dispute. He had no idea that in 11 minutes the world he'd built for 23 years was going to be handed to him in a manila envelope. The plant was automating, 47 positions eliminated. Gary's was one of them. He drove home in silence. He sat in his car in the driveway for 20 minutes before he could make himself go inside. His wife, Donna, knew the moment she saw his face. That night, after Donna went to bed, Gary sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a pen. He wrote 2 columns. The first one was what we owe. The second one was what we have. The first column was longer. Mortgage, car payment, Kayla's college fund, utilities, insurance. He added it all up 3 times, as if the number might change. It didn't. His severance check would cover 4 months, maybe 5 if they were careful. After that, they'd be underwater. He was 52 years old. He had one skill set, and the job that skill set was built for no longer existed. What do you do when the life you built, brick by brick, year by year, suddenly has no floor? If you're Gary Merritt, you go back to basics, all the way back. The idea. For 6 weeks after losing his job, Gary did what everyone expected him to do. He sent out resumes, he drove to interviews, he sat across from hiring managers 20 years his junior and tried to explain why 23 years of factory experience made him an asset in a world that was moving past factories. He got 3 callbacks, 0 offers. The rejections didn't crush him all at once. They did something slower and more corrosive. They made him doubt the thing he'd never doubted before, his own worth. One afternoon in late November, his neighbor Karen knocked on the door. Her washing machine was making a sound she described as, and these are her exact words, like a cat dying inside a dishwasher. Gary looked at it. He diagnosed the problem in 4 minutes. A worn-out drum bearing and a belt that had slipped off track. He had the parts in his garage. He fixed it in 2 hours. Karen tried to give him $40. He waved her off. He didn't want to take money from a neighbor. But something happened in those 2 hours that hadn't happened in 6 weeks of job searching. He felt competent again. He felt useful. He felt like himself. That night, Gary told Donna what had happened. And Donna, who had watched her husband shrink a little more with every rejection letter, said something simple that would turn out to change everything. She said, "Gary, what if you charged for that?" He laughed. He told her nobody would pay someone to fix appliances out of their garage. She pulled up Craigslist on her phone and showed him listings. Appliance repair services, charging $120 just to show up. 2-week wait times. Customers complaining they never got a call back. Gary got quiet. He looked at his garage, at the tools he'd been collecting for 30 years. Then he looked at the kitchen table where the bills were stacked in a neat, terrible pile. He didn't sleep much that night. But for the first time in 6 weeks, it wasn't because he was afraid. It was because his mind was moving again. He had one problem. He couldn't run a business from the garage. The HOA rules in his neighborhood forbade it. He couldn't have customers coming to the house. He needed a space. A real commercial space in Lansing started at $600 a month. He didn't have $600 a month. But on a Thursday morning in early December, driving past the edge of town on his way to another job interview he already knew wasn't going to work out, Gary passed a storage facility. And he had a thought. What if the storage unit was the business? The storage unit. He pulled in the next morning. A 10-by-10 unit was $87 a month. No lease commitment longer than 30 days, no credit check, no business plan required. He signed the paperwork with a pen that was chained to the counter. He paid cash. When the manager rolled up the door to show him the unit, Gary stood in the entrance for a long moment. Concrete floor, metal walls, a single overhead light on a pull string. He drove home. He loaded his truck with his best tools, the socket set his father had given him, the multimeter he'd had for 15 years, the motor testing rig he'd built himself from YouTube tutorials. He set up a folding table against the back wall. He hung a pegboard and laid out every tool in its place. He swept the concrete floor twice. Then he sat in a folding chair, in this 10-by-10 metal box at the edge of town, and he opened a new Craigslist account. His listing read, "Appliance repair, honest work, fair prices. I fix what others throw away. 25 years experience. Call Gary." He didn't have a business name. He didn't have a website. He didn't have a logo. He had a phone number and a folding table, and 23 years of knowing exactly what was wrong with the machine before he even opened it up. The first call came 2 days later. A woman named Sandra with a dryer that had stopped heating. Gary drove to her house, diagnosed it in 10 minutes, a failed heating element, drove back to the storage unit, ordered the part online for $14, installed it the next afternoon. He charged her $60. Sandra told her sister told her neighbor. Her neighbor posted in a Facebook neighborhood group. Within 3 weeks, Gary had more calls than he could handle alone. But the storage unit had a problem he hadn't anticipated. He couldn't bring appliances to the unit without people seeing, and the storage facility had a rule against running a business from a unit. So Gary adapted. He did most repairs on site at the customer's home. The storage unit became his parts depot, his tool storage, and his thinking space. The place he went at 6 a.m. before the first job and at 9 p.m. after the last one. It was the smallest headquarters in the history of American enterprise, and it was working. By the end of his 3rd month, Gary Merritt was making more money than he'd made in his last year at the factory. The growth. By month 4, Gary had a problem he had never expected to have: too much work. He was booking 3 to 5 jobs a day, 6 days a week. His back was starting to protest. His hands, always strong, always sure, were beginning to remind him that he wasn't 25 anymore. He needed help. His nephew Derek was 20 years old. He had dropped out of community college after 1 semester and was working part-time at a gas station, living in a spare room at his mother's house, unsure what he was supposed to do with his life. Gary called him on a Sunday night. He said, "I'll teach you everything I know. I'll pay you $15 an hour to start, and if you show up, work hard and learn. There's something real here for both of us." Derek showed up the next morning at 6:30. For the first 2 weeks, Derek mostly watched and handed Gary tools. But Gary was a patient teacher. He explained what he was doing as he did it. He told Derek, not just the how, but the why this part fails before that one, why a certain sound means a motor bearing and not a belt, why a customer's description of a problem is almost never accurate, but always useful. Within 6 weeks, Derek was running solo jobs, simple ones at first, filter replacements, drum belt swaps, then more complex repairs. By month 7, he was Gary's equal on most residential appliances. Gary used the extra capacity to expand into commercial clients, laundromats, small restaurants, a retirement community whose maintenance manager had found Gary's Craigslist ad and couldn't believe the turnaround time. He moved his business off Craigslist and onto Google. He got a second-hand website built by a local college student for $300. He started collecting Google reviews, and the reviews were extraordinary. Not just good service. People wrote paragraphs. "Gary saved us thousands of dollars. The only repair guy I'll ever call again. I referred him to my entire family." His business had a name now. He'd registered it at the county clerk's office on a Wednesday morning. XeeLife Repairs. The name meant something to him. Every appliance he fixed was getting a second life. And quietly, without saying it out loud to anyone, so was he. By the end of month 12, XeeLife Repairs had over 200 regular clients, a waiting list, and a monthly revenue of $9,000. 6 months after that, it crossed $11,000 a month. Gary hired a second helper. He bought a used cargo van, white, with the business name hand-lettered on the side, by a sign painter he found at a flea market. He stopped checking the bank account every morning out of fear. He started checking it out of curiosity. The reckoning. Not everything about the story is triumph. The honest version includes the weeks Gary wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. The morning he got 3 cancellations in a row and told Donna he was thinking about going back to the job boards. The winter when the cargo van broke down and the repair bill nearly wiped out a month of profit. There were moments, more than he likes to admit, when 52 felt very old, and the storage unit felt very small, and the gap between where he was and where he needed to be felt impossibly wide. He told me once, and I want to share this with you because I think it's the most important thing he said. He told me that the hardest part of building something from nothing isn't the money. It isn't the long hours or the aching back or the customers who argue over invoices. The hardest part is the silence. The silence of being your own boss means there's nobody to tell you you're doing well, nobody to give you a performance review, nobody to say, "Good job this quarter, Gary." When you work for yourself, the only voice you have to rely on is your own, and for a man who had spent 23 years measuring his worth by a paycheck someone else wrote, learning to trust that voice was the real work. There were nights he'd drive to the storage unit at 10 p.m. just to sit in there. Not to work, just to be in the space he had built, to look at the pegboard, to run his hands over the tool chest. To remind himself, this is real, I made this, no one can take this from me. His daughter Kayla was home from college during one of those nights. She saw his truck gone, texted him asking where he was. He told her. She drove to the storage facility, knocked on the unit door at 11 p.m., and sat with him on folding chairs for an hour, talking. She told him she'd never been more proud of him than she was right now. Not when he bought the house, not when he put her college fund together dollar by dollar over 15 years. Right now, sitting in this metal box that smelled like motor oil and possibility. Where he is now, today, XeeLife Repairs has 3 full-time employees, including Derek, who now runs the residential division entirely on his own. Gary has moved the business out of the storage unit and into a proper workshop space, a small commercial unit on the east side of the city. It costs $600 a month. He paid the first check with a smile that took 3 years to earn. He still keeps the key to the original storage unit. He has it on his key ring, right next to his car key. He says he never wants to forget what it felt like to start. Gary Merritt lost his job at 52, and for a while, a long, dark kitchen table at midnight kind of while. It looked like that was the end of the story. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because here's what the factory couldn't give Gary Merritt and couldn't take away from him either: the knowledge of what his hands were capable of, the patience he had developed over 23 years of precision work, the dignity of a man who knew how to look at something broken and see, not a problem, but a solution waiting to be found. He lost everything at 52. He found himself at 52 and a half. That's what this channel is about. Real people, real stories, the kind of comeback that doesn't happen in movies. It happens in storage units, in kitchens, in the quiet moments when someone decides they're not done yet. If this story moved you, if there's someone in your life who needs to hear it, share it with them. And subscribe to Chronicle and Soul, because next week we have another story that will remind you exactly what human beings are capable of. Until then, stay with the story.